Good evening, everybody. If you wouldn't mind grabbing some seats. We're going to start now. All right, thanks everybody for coming. My name's John Reiner. I'm the Director of Planning and Development Services for the town. With me here tonight is Mark Berry.
Director of Parks and Recreation.
Thanks. Yeah. And we really appreciate everybody coming out. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to start getting some public feedback on the long-term plan for the reuse of the Claude Chester property. With us tonight is also Chad Frost from Kenton Frost. Chad is going to lead us through a short presentation. We're going to do a number of exercises tonight to try to get feedback on a number of different uses. There's a number of different town staff here, from the Parks and Rec Department, the Town Manager's Office, Office of Planning and Development, here to answer questions, but really we want to get feedback from the people here. This is not a public hearing per se, but more we're going to be going through a number of exercises. I don't know if anything you wanted to say, Mark?
Yes. So the parcel that we're looking at tonight is one of the gateways into Groton. And so it's really important that we get this right, and we're really looking forward to your feedback, your vision, because this is going to help kind of set the tone for what Groton looks like for the foreseeable future. So anyway, thank you for your time, thank you for coming out tonight, and look forward to your feedback.
Okay, so without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Chad. And as we're talking tonight, we are recording this so that it can be watched later, but also for people to hear if they want to watch the recording later. If you speak, we do ask that you speak into a microphone. So we got a few up here. There'll be some of us walking around with mics if people have questions. And then as we go through these exercises at the end, we'll be looking to have people report out from some of the groups. So make sure you're talking into a mic at any of those times. So, Chad?
Thank you, John. All right, can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. All right, first, I'm glad to see how many people we got. I was a little nervous at about 5:05. We didn't have many, but it's filled in very great, so I'm happy to see this many people got it. And I hope that you all went to the Greater Groton website as well and filled out some information there, because that's really where a lot of this stuff starts tonight, is the input we got from the public over the last couple of weeks, from what we call program items, is what we are going over tonight. So really quickly about me. My name is Chad Frost. I'm with Kent Frost Landscape Architecture. We are based here in Groton, in Mystic. This is my staff. We do, all of us live, work, and play here in Groton. We have done work for the town for over 20 years. Some of the projects we've done around, you'd probably recognize the Thompson Building. We did the Nature Center's Coogan Farm Master Plan, Hygienic Art Park about 20 years ago. We did that in New London. And then we also work throughout the rest of the state. And that lower right is the Store Center campus, where we did their town green, and I'll talk about that in a second. So again, we live, work, and play here. Not only am I here as a consultant, I'm also a taxpayer in town, and so it's really unique when we work all over the town and throughout a couple different states to be able to get to work in the town we live and work in, so I'm happy to be here. And my kids have gone through the school system here. One's now off in college, one's in high school, one's in middle school. So I definitely feel enamored with the town for sure. So what we're doing tonight is a public vision workshop. We are here to hear your ideas, how you want to see the Claude Chester property specifically, and then the surrounding properties used in the foreseeable future. It's about what we collectively want this place to be when we're done. So I'm going to go over a couple of things. First is the project location. Then what we call the program items. Those are the different amenities that we might want to have out there on site. And then we're going to go through about 3 different exercises. One, you'll get up and walk around and kind of rank those things. I have a budgeting tool. We're going to look at how we might want to spend some money. And then a ranking tool as well. So looking in on the area, obviously we all found our way here. Right in front of the library in Thrive 55, we've got Claude Chester School. This is all the publicly owned land in this immediate vicinity. So from Sutton Park to the Central Park, to the community center and town hall, down here to the boardwalk where the new pump track will be going, and Bluff Point to the south. Ring Drive, Gosa's open space off to the right-hand side. So a lot of great publicly available space in the center of town. Additionally, we're talking about, there are 2 pieces of property here in yellow that are up for sale currently. And so as we go through tonight and talk about the different program items, if for some reason we come up with enough program items, if the public really wants enough stuff that we can't fit on available lands that we already have, then we can be making recommendations if it's a wise choice for the town to be investing in additional property right here kind of in the center. Does that make sense? Okay. So program uses, as I mentioned, this is a snapshot from just this afternoon on the Groton community. I'm going to blow the website. Greater Groton, thank you. Greater Groton website. These are all the comments that we've gotten so far. So all the different uses that were recommended, we are taking and we're bringing into this exercise tonight, and then we're open to more suggestions tonight as well. So what we want to do is kind of run through those program items. When I say something, a lot of times we all don't necessarily envision the exact same thing when we talk about something. This one I think is pretty obvious. The school obviously deemed, or the school board deemed that it was no longer usable and functional for a school. Town staff has gone through it and also deemed that it's really not usable for another town facility within the town. So one of the first steps is the removal of the school is what we think is most likely necessary. The next item that we heard quite a bit about over the last year is a town green. Great ideas. What I want to hear a little bit tonight is, what is a town green? Because everybody thinks it's a little bit different. These are 2 town greens that we've done for 2 different towns. On the right is Storrs Center. They wanted a town green, but when they started talking to us about how much program activity they were going to do out there, the amount of concerts they wanted to run in the summer, when UConn wins a national championship, this is where the bus stops and all the players get out. It's such an intensive activity that if we made it a true green with lawn, the lawn would just be a mud pit all year round. So we talked to them about how do we do that the right way to make their green that they can use it the way they want to use it. The one on the left is Ledyard Center. So we did everything through Ledyard Center, the streetscape, the police station, the town hall, and their town green as well. Very different use, right? They want to use it for farmers markets, as you can see the kid up there, the fair and things like that, more local community events. So by a raise of hands, I'll do one and then the other. From a use standpoint, to the public that's here tonight, do you want a more intensive with concerts type of town green, or do you want a less intensive like farmers market town green? So I'm going to say intensive with concerts. If you want to raise your hands first, it's just totally informal. Okay. A handful. And then less formal with more of the farmers markets, more open green. Want them both. Okay. Who wants them both? We want everything. Perfect. All right. I like it. And so that's part of what we want to hear is how do we need to know what the public wants so that we can give you what we as a community want. The other item we've heard quite a bit is the athletic fields. On the right was the athletic field master plan that we actually developed for Merritt Fields or Merritt property before the middle school went up there. That was all multi-use rectangles at that point in time, but it was a full amenities. So when we talk about athletic fields tonight, we're talking about both baseball, softball, and multi-use fields. And we're talking about all the amenities that are needed to go along with those. So this is just an example of what a multi-use facility could like, that it has restrooms, it has lights, it has both sides fields, it has softball, baseball. Those are what the Athletic Fields Task Force has identified as needs, quite significant needs within the town. So when we talk about athletic fields, this is what we're talking about. Concession buildings, yep, kind of the full service of what we really need in town. And ideally centrally located so that you can run tournaments and things like that with them as well. What we're not talking about yet is materials and choice. There's a whole lot of things to talk about, but this is kind of what we talk about when we mean athletic fields. Pedestrian connectivity was something we heard quite a bit about. Right now we have quite a bit of sidewalks in this area of town, not fully connected, but most of them are fairly narrow, hard for 2 people to walk side by side, and definitely hard for somebody to be passing you as they're coming or going. So what we think we're hearing when people say they want better pedestrian connectivity is wider sidewalks with more opportunity for people to be able to pass and possibly rest, and safe areas to cross, potentially medians and areas like that, landscaped buffers, so that it's a much more gracious and safe pedestrian and potentially bicycling as well. And speaking of bicycling, as I mentioned, we did the bike ped plan for the town of Groton almost 20 years ago now. It's been a hot topic, or a high-level topic throughout town for quite a long time. We continue to hear bike lanes, bikeability, but not just what you do on the on-road facilities, but also providing for parking and storage and things like that. So that was something that we've heard through this process so far. Playgrounds came up quite a bit. Tri-Centennial Playground is awesome. It gets used substantially and has for many, many years, and it will get worn out if we don't give a little bit more space for people to be able to play and spread out all of those intensive activities. So the ability to possibly add a playground, and whether that means more of that a complete accessibility type playground or adding in some natural elements at the same time so that we have different elements of play will probably be important. Public event space. This is a little bit tricky, but this is one that we heard quite a bit. And what do we mean by public event space? I think this, just the way I interpret it, is probably larger than what most people thought of when they think of public event space, but something a little bit smaller. The venues that are a size of a couple of fields, just from a space perspective, is probably what it sounds like people were intending by the comments we saw. And so that's what we talk about from public event. This is not like, a Bruce Paisley concert. This is local events and things like that can be done. And the one thing that we will want to talk about, if this still kind of passes the bar tonight, is how will we run those concerts, who's running those concerts? Because the town already does a very nice concert series already down at the beach. And so we don't want to duplicate that or overwhelm staff trying to run 2 different concert venues that are literally just a couple miles apart. Streetscape improvements. So as we know, right outside here, there's not much streetscape improvements. It's basically just a highway that goes straight down, a little bit of sidewalk where we're lucky, and some fencing. And so all the different improvements that we can make around there, from street trees to separated bike lanes to tree planted buffers to better stormwater infiltration. We know this area floods significantly during major storms. So the ability for this to be able to infiltrate that water or even hold the water during storm events and then release it is another great opportunity for this project. We did get the suggestion online about relocating some town hall offices. As I mentioned at the beginning, staff has looked at that and doesn't think it's a very viable option. There is the middle school just down the way a little bit that they are looking at relocating some of the staff and trying to bring them in there and make that building more of a centrally located office space for staff, but I included it because it was in the comments online. Outdoor classroom. So again, when we think outdoor classroom, this is what we're kind of imagining, either a nature-based or something built in a little bit. Not huge, again, not an amphitheater that does massive concerts or venues, but truly more of an outdoor classroom experience. Shade structures, pavilions, right? If we're out there on a site and it's really big and really hot like it's been some of these weekends, or rainy, the ability to have a little bit of shade. Not huge shade structures is what we've heard, but small, so you can have groups, you can have activities going on. If there is a field there, you could have a place for people to stay under, a permanent structure or shelter. Always a great thing to have in a location like this. Public restrooms. We always need public restrooms. And they're expensive, and we tend to not put them in when we should, and we put in porta potties and try to get along as long as we can. The recommendation, if we do anything with that property, real bathrooms need to be brought in. Whether they're composting or hooked up, all that sort of things are decisions to be made. And how many will depend on what type of actual uses we program for that space down the road. So 2 things that kind of popped out at me that were a little bit interesting was the amount of pool and splash pad recommendations that we got through the online comment section. So we broke these into 2 categories because there was a whole lot of people saying splash pad, splash pad, splash pad, and small kind of water park stuff. So what we did is, as you'll rank in just a little bit, is we named them community pool minor, which in this case is kind of some people were wanting a smaller outdoor pool they could swim laps in, and splash pads for sure. And then we named another one Community Pool Major, because there were people asking for almost a full natatorium, right? A full 8-lane pool. You can do laps. You can have a water-type park in there. That's a pretty big project that I hadn't heard before, but there was actually quite a few people online that were looking for that, so we included that as well. Another one is placemaking and public art. It's something we like to do everywhere that we go. We like to be able to create meaningful, memorable exterior spaces, and having a space that's unique to Groton is, makes it very identifiable. And so public art and placemaking doesn't have to be significantly expensive, but it can have a very big impact. And so on that right-hand side, those were trellises that we actually designed for Storrs Center. And they liked them so much, they grew up the vines, the flowers on them that we were expecting. They now have turned that into their logo. So the Storrs Mansfield Center, Storrs Center's logo is the planting trellis vines that we designed there. So they can have a placemaking effect, even if it's not some giant grand thing. Sustainable design, native plantings. We hear this a lot, which I'm happy to hear about. Pollinator gardens, bee habitat, all those things are very important. We want to make sure what we do put in there is both maintainable but also good for the environment. And whether that means biofiltration and stormwater infiltration and how we can recirculate the water is something else we heard quite a bit about. All right, so these are the program uses that we've heard about so far, right? And I went through all of them. They are also all on those 4 boards across the side over there. What we like people to do is that we're going to hand out a bunch of stickers, a bunch of red dots, and we want to hopefully kind of go through in somewhat of an orderly fashion. It's going to take a little bit because we got a good turnout right now. But there is the ranking, right? So in this case, school demolition. Do we not need, indifferent, would like, must have, right? So this is how we're going to quickly rank, and it really works quite well because you can see stickers gather in big clumps pretty quickly. So Jerry, I'll grab you, and then John, we'll grab a couple of people and we will start throwing around stickers. And if we can cycle through as quickly as we can so we don't have to be here too long, that would be great. One sheet. Yeah, they won't need all of them.
Thing right on ball floors.
She was just sending it.
Yeah. It's not enough. It isn't. Oh. Oh, yeah. Right.
GIS project for the town of Groton, but I ended up doing it for
someplace.
someone else. I think this one. What happened?
Yep.
Yeah, because I finished the project in the summer of 2019. I tried keeping on, getting in contact with him, and just never returned my emails.
Yep.
But it was unfortunate it. We spent a long time making that map of all the brownstone fields in Groton. So
Did you ever turn that into anybody? Is that
it was a Carlson project. It's included in the Sustainable Connecticut Green Award or whatever.
Okay.
And so
Oh.
it's a Carlson program, and we didn't have Carlson as a program, so they
Okay.
couldn't view my map.
Oh,
So I don't know what I can do with it, but I still have it.
huh. Deb, is that something? Yeah, they're not portable. Just pick your stuff up.
Yeah, I'm going to ocean engineering now. I transferred from Three Rivers, and now I'm going for ocean engineering.
Okay.
I'm working for Streetscape Conservation District.
Oh,
I'm
excellent.
like this guy in there, so I love it. It's great.
Oh, good. So the format of your map is in.
The format of the map is like Carlson, and then it was part of GIS.
Oh, okay. So then we can, yeah. So we could. Do you want to send me the file? And, yeah, a GIS guy. Okay.
Someone's got to have it also.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So if you just email me the file.
Like in middle school? You're in middle school, right?
sitting down.
Yeah.
So please feel free to grab some food as you're mingling around and finishing up your votes.
All right, if we can hopefully wrap it up. Is this working? Yes. Yep, okay. All right, I think we're ready to sit down and continue.
Oh, sorry. All right, are we ready to continue? Yeah.
So hopefully everybody's gotten this worksheet that we just started passing out and a pencil. If you need one, John will be happy to bring one around. No, it can be a pen, doesn't matter. Pen, pencil, just a writing utensil. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So this next one is going to be kind of a budgeting tool to help figure out what's important to you. What we're adding to the list now, so all of those amenities are things that really cost the town money to install. And then what we're adding now is things that we call revenue generators. So other components that could go there that generate money for the town instead of cost money. And I will fully argue all day long that having beautiful amenities like parks and things like that are a revenue generator, but they don't produce taxes. And so that's why we separate the two out, right? You might be able to create events to come in and use those things, and that does create economic vitality, but it's different than taxes, building a tax base. So what we did here on the forum was a couple of different revenue generators. Mixed use, what we're saying, mixed use major, which would be a pretty substantial, when we say mixed use, that means mixed use of building style. So that's like commercial first floor, residential second or third floor, or maybe commercial first and second, residential third, but it's mixed use from a building perspective. So if you think of downtown Mystic, where you might have merchants on the first floor and residential above, mixed use major, mixed use minor, right? And so that's just the scale of the development that people may or may not want. We heard childcare facility as something that is needed in the area. Some people are recommending residential development, so just sell the whole property and build another neighborhood. And then the other one, roller skating rink. Now that the one roller skating rink has closed in town, should we be building a second one? And so, with those added into it, this next exercise is going to be a little bit two parts. So first part, you're going to do it individually. And then ideally what we wanted was people to get together in the table you're at. So after you do it once by yourself, then you're going to negotiate with your neighbors and do another joint one to see if we can kind of come to a consensus between more than just yourself. So with this, yeah, question.
Is there any possibility, or is there any possibility of adding something to that list?
Sure, what would you like?
A incubator, a business incubator.
Business incubator, okay.
We have one that's completely full.
Okay, excellent to know. So definitely, if everybody heard that, we can add business incubator on there as a potential. The business incubator. So I'll try to explain it. Business incubator is a building. There's a good example of one in Ledyard, probably another one here in Groton, where it's a building that's there and it allows space at a reduced rent for businesses to come in and be able to start up. It only normally allows them to stay for a handful of years before they need to kind of move on and grow up, if you will, and go out and get bigger space. So that would be a business incubator could be added. Is there another one? I saw another hand go up. Like,
Excuse me, I think you misunderstood.
okay,
We are talking about various uses for the school, tearing it down, using it for other things.
yep.
I don't see this as an either-or proposition. I see it as a both-and proposition where we could incorporate a public space, we could incorporate business incubator and other things. Thank you.
Excellent. Paige?
Just to clarify one point, you had mixed use and you showed vertical. Mixed use could be the single story as well?
Good clarification. All right, so this budgeting tool, and this is high level budgeting, right? So there's a whole lot of things, and there's reasons that we just say things cost $100 because we don't want to get fixated on actual numbers, but we want to have a range and an idea. So if you've started already reading the instructions, you have $1,000 to spend. That program element list is over $2,000 worth of improvements. So what we want you to do is go through in the next like 5 minutes, go through and pick the items that you want. If you feel really strongly for bicycle facilities, and even though we put $50 on it, and you want to spend $300 on it, that's entirely your prerogative. You can spend more, you just can't spend less on each program item. Correct. You don't have to pick it at all, right? So you can't possibly pick everything because there's too much there. There's $2,000 worth of ideas. So this is just helps us think about it from a budget perspective of if this was your money, if you had $1,000 to spend, this is your shopping list, how would you spend that $1,000? Right? And then at the bottom of it, now that we're talking about revenue generators, so you see the bottom 5 things have got some pluses next to them. So if you chose mixed use development major, right, which would honestly occupy most of the site, so we don't have a lot of the site left over for things, but that would generate income back. So it gives you an additional $300 to spend if you were to take that one. If you did the mixed use minor, that's $150 that you get to add to your budget, right? So if you pick one of those bottom 5 items, it adds that money back onto your $1,000 budget. Does that make sense? Perfect. Question? Well,
Can I steal your signage?
how much acreage is there? I don't remember.
Athletic fields for who? No, athletic
It's
fields for
I
who?
would say it's around 10 acres,
Do you
is
know?
my guess. Not all of this can fit.
Athletic fields
We have more,
Yeah.
but from a budget
we
perspective
talking
and more from a site perspective than we can fit. This is just a theoretical.
Recreation, we talking
idea.
about the high
Yep.
school.
It'd be recreation. We're focused on the Claude Chester property.
Right, I understand.
So
but
it's
they
not
identified
really
that
high
athletic
school.
fields are needed at the high school in
Right.
more need than in.
Yes, we were saying the athletic fields includes everything, so yes. Yes. Yep.
If they can't, we need them somewhere else. So athletic fields for who? That's so vague.
Recreation, adult sports.
And high school?
Yep, absolutely. So we would do, again, we're not worried about space yet on this one. This is budget. And so whatever does get approved, and we'll talk about that, I shouldn't say approved, whatever gets recommended will come with the spatial requirements necessary from a parking perspective, as well as a spatial perspective of whatever that use is as well.
So I had a question.
11.5 acres is the official number.
I had a question. So some of these headings seems kind of generic for me.
Yep.
Athletic fields were identified. One of the greater needs that I had heard was high school athletic fields were in high demand. So when you say athletic fields, and I'm picking here, are we referring to like pay to play, Parks and Rec? Are we talking about the high school possibly, or is that really not identified here?
So at this point, what we weren't trying to get that specific. We were going to go to say, since the Athletic Fields Task Force was recommending certain fields, this would be that recommendation. And then in the notes category, if you feel really strongly that it should be a softball field or a high school facility, then put that in there. And then when we tally all of these over the next couple days, we'll include
Okay.
that. But great question. Yep,
Assuming that you have roller skating rink, is that a building?
that would be a building. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's another one. Revenue generators, this is for putting those things definitely on site, because something you don't seem to be covering is that, could we put this someplace else?
So excellent question right there, right? The question was, so the revenue generators go on this site. And what we talked about a little bit at the beginning, and maybe I didn't clarify it good enough, was that this site, meaning Claude Chester site, is the main site, but we do know there's those 2 other properties for sale, so that if there's enough demand that we need to move something and we don't have enough space, then we'd be looking at those alternate properties to see if it's worth evaluating purchasing them.
So the question was, somebody asked what the 2 other sites that were referenced at the beginning. So those were the Ackley property and the Burroughs property. Yeah, the Groton Family Farm, yeah. And again, what we're trying to do is just gauge people's general preference, not getting super specific, but all this information helps us then start getting towards a little bit more of a specific recommendation and getting community feedback. And, take this seriously, get us the best input you can on this so we can use and compile this information to then start working on the next phase of this project to then bring something back to the public. So I saw a couple more hands. This gentleman here, yeah.
There's an open space piece of property.
Yeah.
Yes. Correct. Yes.
Piece on Ring, this is Ring. Okay, that piece. Does that connect to the sheep farm?
That I don't.
We're not proposing doing anything on Ring Drive.
Enter that.
No, that map was just to clarify how much publicly available open space there is in this area. Just like the GOSA property, we're not proposing to do anything on that property. We're just identifying it so that sometimes we have a hard time really looking down on a map and understanding when we drive by something how close it might be to something across the street from a different road. So that's why we included it. Yes. Agree.
Yeah, hi. You referenced the Groton Family Farm and the Ackley property. Isn't it the reality that they're up for sale?
Yes, they are both listed for sale.
So is it probable that they won't be available?
It's possible they won't be available. It's also possible, because they're for sale, they are potentially available if the town really felt that they were necessary to purchase. You normally can't buy, it's harder to buy property if it's not for sale. So the fact that it is for sale is why we included it at this point. And it was part of what the town council was asking for this greater master plan to look at, to have a plan to be able to let the town council know if it was necessary to buy additional property to do everything that residents would like to do in the area. So that's why we included it.
I got another question over here. Could a town farm be included in this list? A town farm. Farm, yes.
Yeah. So I don't disagree with feeding ourselves. I think that's probably a hard stretch for the town to be able to be owning and running and maintaining a farm. A community garden is one thing, but I wouldn't suggest for the town to try to operate a farm. But if you really want it, write it in, and we'll have it included. Yeah.
We're talking about like outdoor classroom and stuff like that.
So there are other properties that we're specifically not dealing with. So the question was, there's other school properties in town that are not being utilized to their fullest. We're focusing on this geographic area right here. So that's what we're focused on right now. And there's other committees, I think, that are doing excess town property.
There's a town council committee looking at the process for how we utilize and look at other town properties, all town properties together. I think they're meeting every other Wednesday right now. They just had a meeting June 1st or so. You can watch those on YouTube, but that's a council group that's looking into that process. But again, for purposes of tonight, we're looking at Claude Chester, this geographic area. This woman in the back had a question.
Hi, I do not have any interest in athletic fields, and nobody in my family does either. But because that's something that seems to be of a particular audience, I just wonder, have these people who feel so strongly about needing it had the opportunity to state their case? Because I'm not familiar with what we need or what we have at all. So that is actually the only thing in particular that I see that's for a specific group that that a lot of us I would never use. So I think because of that, and it does seem to have a big split between must-have and no. I think that might be fair.
So I can try to answer that question for you because, so my office has worked on fields and recreation in the town for quite a long time. The first study we did on when Park and Rec first identified they had a field shortage need. They didn't have enough fields to go around for the amount of people coming and requesting field space. It was before my kids were born. And my oldest is now in college. And so we did the first study back then saying, how many more fields do we need? And we did quite a big in-depth study to look at it. We quantified every single athlete, both youth and adult, and all the different leagues that play out there, and found that they were heavily overused, and that was causing a whole lot more maintenance. And so we've identified for over a decade now kind of how many more fields should be identified. It came up again a handful of years ago, about 3 years ago probably now with town council, where they formed a task force and then evaluated again, and that task force has now made recommendations to the town as to how many new fields the town needs in order to meet its basic need at this point.
So it just wouldn't mean, okay, this team's going to play this team on Saturday at 10 and, so you see people out there doing all kinds of things. So when you say an athletic field, it's not so totally specific.
And
To me, it's not.
We do intend them to be multi-use, is what everybody has been talking about. And I will just mention, the high school is mentioned too as lack of fields. And the high school has no outside facilities for the female sports other than the track, right? So there's no softball field. There's a need at the high school, and that need has been trickling down to Park and Rec has been having to fulfill field space for the high school. So there is a trickle-down problem, and what we're talking about is all fields, inclusive of both the high school and the youth.
And just to add to that, there'll be an even bigger demand because there's already 150 athletes that use that Claude Chester property from August 1st through the end of October, and we're going to need to find a new place for them to go. And if there's not any athletic fields, that's going to be a real disadvantage to those kids that rely on that program.
And the new middle school was just built with no athletic fields?
It was built with one synthetic turf field, which
Okay.
is the first one in town, which was great, a smaller practice field, and a softball field, right? But we went from, again, from a community perspective, we at one point had 3 middle schools that all had their own fields and all had their own sports teams. Then we went to 2 middle schools that had their own sports teams and their own fields. Now we're down to 1 middle school, and all we put in were 3 fields. And those fields are now used by the high school because the high school doesn't have a field really to play on from a multi-use perspective. The football field is only for football because that's all it can support. So now you have what was 3 middle schools, all those sports using 1 field, plus the high school trying to use 1 field. So it's a heavily, heavily used brand new field.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
I have a question about the business incubator that was added.
Yep.
What do we make that worth?
What do we make that worth? I did not give you a value, did I? I would say we would make that worth 150. So the business incubator will be a plus 150. That's something you went for. All right, has everybody had a chance to fill those out? So next what I want you to do is to try to grab about, if you're at a table that's two-sided, if you have somewhere between 5, 6, 10 people, and then we're going to hash out everybody's sheets to see if we can come to a consensus. And I'd like to have one kind of spokesperson from each little group to be able to stand up at the end and tell us, and then also mark table whatever, make up a name for yourself. And since we don't have numbers, and then we'll collect those at the end because we'll use those separately. So I want to have them separate from this. Yes. You have to.
You can have dissenting opinions. Yeah. Yeah, so you're 1 table. Yep. Yep, so you're a table.
That's connectivity, that was one of the highest rates of athletic fields in the middle.
All right, are we almost wrapped up? We have one more exercise, and I want to get through that before it gets too late and we can be respectful of everyone's time. All right, compute away. We got 1 minute. Try to get it wrapped up in 1 minute. Let's start.
What are we handing out?
The last piece of homework.
Oh, okay.
All right, last piece of homework.
All right, everybody gets one check?
And don't throw away your other one.
All right.
Last piece of homework.
Last piece of Last piece of homework. This one will be graded, so make sure you stay inside the lines.
I would agree with you. Like I said, I see the kids using the field. I see the kids playing basketball every day. There's not a single place to park. They'll figure that out. I can't.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah. Oh, wait. No. Yeah.
All right, have every group finished up? If you could at least write a group name on it so that we know which one is the group worksheet as opposed to the individual worksheets, because we're going to tally those separately at the end. So we'll collect everything. Correct. I don't need your name on individuals. The zebras. Perfect. The zebras. I want to see the zebra team. Yep. All right, now we have one last worksheet to try to get through and get everybody out the door.
Or if you don't have a name for your table, just write table at the top of that sheet so we know it's a table sheet.
Yes, that'd be fine too.
You compiled it all into one.
Yep. So the last one, and this is a very theoretical question, right? But we're trying to understand the appetite for the public to take on more liability from a spending point, which means tax, right? And so what we've done here is identify that the 2022 budget of 138, the mill rate at 26, the median home value at 300,000, and the approximate value of taxes that one median home pays. And then, and that's theoretical, right? We're not getting into, there's all sorts of things we could get into in debate, but we're trying to keep it at a very high level. So if the project, and we're not even talking about what the project is, if the project that you want is selected, how important is it to you? And how much money are you willing to spend in your taxes to support that project? Right? So the first one is 0, because this project isn't important to me and the town shouldn't spend money on it. Or 0, because this project is important to me. This whole project. Yes. Yes. And we're not saying even what that project is. It could, right? This is just a theoretical to take your appetite on adding to the tax base or adding to the tax demand. So the first one is 0. The second one is a $5 million project. What that equates to is either a 3.1% single year increase or a 0.22% annual increase if it's bonded over 20 years, right? And so you can see there that 3.1 equates to roughly, and these are all theoretical numbers, $280 a year if you were to do it just in 1 year in like a capital improvement project. If you bonded it over 20, that's $18 a year. Right? The $10 million project is a 7.2 single year increase or a 0.45% annual increase over 20 years. So that's either $561 for 1 year or $35 a year for 20 years. The $15 million project, and you can see, I shouldn't read all these for you, but it's 10.3 for a single year at $841, or 0.67 over 20 years at $53 a year. And the $20 million project is 14.4% in a single year, or 0.9 over 20 years, roughly about $70, right? So I stopped it at 20, right? Because in theory, what we know from designing parks around here, what we've talked about is, right now, my guess was, and I could be wrong, if everybody in here picks $20 million, then we probably didn't go high enough with our ask, like with our figuring it out. But what we're trying to do is figure out if there's a range of where people are acceptable to a project of their choosing, and that's still up for being chosen. How much money would you be willing to add to your taxes? Sure. I hadn't imagined that, but if you want to do two projects or combine them together, yeah, sure.
Chad, what was that question?
Can I pick more than one? So if you want to do a single year project of $5 million and a $20 million project for 20 years, you could pick more than one.
If you do pick that option, maybe just put a little note on your sheet that I picked a 1-year option of this and a 20-year option is that.
Yes.
Perhaps I'm a bit dense, but I am confused, that's for certain. Are we talking, there seem to me you're talking about two discrete things. One is the use of the ARP ESSER funds, or the federal funds.
Nope.
None of this is federal funds?
None of this is federal, nope.
Okay, so this would all be on our local tax budget?
Yes.
Thank you for your clarification.
Yep.
Because that's being allocated for a different process. Yeah. So just to make it very clear, because someone else asked the same question, this funding has nothing to do with our ARPA funding process. This is tax that people in the town of Groton would pay. Could there be grants or other things associated with it? Certainly, but tonight we're just trying to get a general feel. This is not an official vote. We're just trying to get a little bit of a general sense of direction from the people that are here tonight so we can continue to move the project forward. So please fill this out before you leave it on the table, or hand it off to Mark Berry or myself or Chad or any of the other staff that are here.
And this is basically it. So once you've filled it out, we're good. I have nothing else for you from that. I'm welcome to take questions up here. If everybody could either leave a pile on your table of each piece of homework or collect it and bring it up here. We just want to make sure we get all the pieces of homework back so we can tally them.
And also, if you have not already, please check out our Greater Groton webpage. There'll be updates on this project on there, surveys, and other information. Thank you very much.